Heather, this is Tracy. Are you going through a divorce with a narcissist? I'm sorry. If you are, it's not going to be easy. But if you are in the position at the beginning of your divorce and you're wondering, how do I pick a good attorney? How do I know that the person that I pick understands about this kind of abuse and these sort of situations that you might find yourself in? There are questions that we should ask attorneys when we're interviewing them. There are things that we're going to need to learn from our attorney, how to be prepared, how to cut the cost, how to understand if cheating plays a role in our divorce case. These are all questions that we all have. And if these are questions that you have, I would like you to stay tuned and watch while I interview Susan Guthrie and Rebecca Zung. They are two attorneys, and they are going to share with us some of the insights that we need to know how to pick these people out, how to get the right help. Because when you're divorcing a narcissist, it is so important to know that things are going to be your fault. You're going to be lied about. You're going to have things slung at you, and you're going to be really confused. So to know that you're up against somebody that hasn't been the one sleeping in your bed for 23 years. You're going to be against somebody that is out to win. Narcissists hate to lose. So what does that give them? It gives them, I've got to win. Even if they don't want it, they are going to fight you for everything. So how do we put a bandage on and stop the bleeding as they try to destroy us financially? How do we get through this divorce in the most humane way possible? All of these things are going to be answered today. So stay tuned as I talk to Susan and Rebecca, and we learn about how to divorce a narcissist and all of the tricks that they might pull. And let's talk about, divorcing a narcissist. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
You're
welcome. So happy to be here.
I am so excited that you are here, specifically Susan at the moment, because you were my divorce lawyer.
I was many years ago.
Yes. It was a really long time, and things have certainly changed, but I am glad that we have kept in touch, and I'm extremely happy that you guys have started a podcast, and you're such a resource for people, because lawyers to most people are this kind of force out there that scares most people who have to go into any kind of litigation, but divorce in particular. Divorce is scary all by itself. And when you're divorcing a narcissist, our goal with this video is to kind of help them see some of the things that might happen, something they can do to prepare, or really how to hire the right lawyer, because that is always a big mistake. How often, let's say, what is the difference? This is my first question. What is the difference between a no-fault state and is there a fault state?
I think, generally every state started out as a fault state. No fault came into being, Rebecca, probably 20 years ago in most states. And I think every state now has a no-fault path. I think the important part for people to understand the difference between fault and no-fault divorce is before you had no fault, you actually had to go to court and prove that your spouse was at fault for the breakdown of the marriage, meaning they had committed adultery, that they had been intolerably cruel, which usually meant at that time physical cruelty, that there had been abandonment by some definition under the law. Usually it was a year without physical or without monetary support. But there were elements that had to be proven in a courtroom before a judge even had the ability to terminate the marital relationship. And by their very nature, those things that are considered fault are the types of behaviors and things people go to great lengths to hide. People do not go out and commit adultery in a place where there can be witnesses and it can be seen and somebody can come in and testify about it. These are not things that are, even the people who are being abused often will hide the abusive behavior of the abuser. So these were terrible situations where people in some instances could not get a divorce because they couldn't prove fault. So no fault really was instituted to give people a path to divorce based upon what we call irreconcilable differences, which really boils down to one of them wants out, and that's all it takes.
And if I could just add to what Susan said, and this is something we actually talked about on our episode called on our podcast, which is Breaking Free, a Modern Divorce podcast. And the name of that episode was Bet You Didn't Know That Adultery Can Bite You in the Ass, even in a no-fault state. And the difference between no fault and fault sometimes is people don't understand that it doesn't mean that fault never matters. It only means that you don't have to prove fault to get divorced. But fault can matter sometimes. If somebody was abusive, or if somebody was, cheating, or wasted a lot of money, or took money and hid it somewhere, or whatever, all those things can impact the outcome of a case. So in a no fault state, it doesn't mean fault never matters. It just means you don't have to prove fault in order to get a divorce.
Okay, that's exactly what I was wondering, because people ask me all the time, and it's always with the caveat that my husband or my wife is cheating. And so therefore they're like, okay, we have is that going to make my divorce more in my favor because they cheated? I think that's what people look at when they're looking at the no fault thing. Like, wait, he cheated, she cheated. Do I have an advantage? And they don't, right? I mean,
well, it depends on what you're talking about, because if that person spent a lot of money on their paramour, then that could potentially be clawed back, if you will, as part of the divorce settlement. So does it mean that they're going to have to walk around the town with an A painted on their, their clothing, and everybody yelling shame as they walk naked through the streets? No, that's not going to happen. The courts aren't going to care that much, but they will care in certain instances. It will come up. And I love Susan's actually phrase of shock the judicial conscience, actually. And Susan, maybe you want to talk more about that, but we talked about it on our one podcast as well.
Yeah, it's that issue. Adultery, first off, I think Rebecca and I would both say that it is actually more common that in the divorce cases we handle, there is not adultery than those cases where it is. I mean, unhappily married people go out and find happiness somewhere else, or find the sexual relationships or something somewhere else. So adultery comes up in almost all divorce cases. Are you going to then go into court and have your spouse punished for their adultery? Not usually. And that's where the shocking new judicial conscience comes up. If their behavior rose to a level, and I always use Tiger Woods as my example, if they were out there lying and just having a course of conduct that was so egregious that a judge who sits there every single day and hears about the things people get up to when their marriages are breaking down, which can be pretty spicy, if you can shock that judge's judicial conscience, then you might get a judge who will take that into consideration when they're making a determination on how to divide the marital estate, meaning who gets more or who pays more, or maybe with spousal support. Certain states certainly have as a factor a judge can take into consideration. One of the factors is who was more at fault for the breakdown of the marriage. But
and actually in Florida, they actually have infidelity as part of the alimony statute, although I've never heard a judge actually say, I'm giving more alimony because this person cheated. But I did have a guy one time who, after the divorce was filed, he started spending thousands and thousands of dollars on his girlfriend, and then said he had no money. And he actually signed a temporary support check just his first name, like he was in kindergarten or something, like just to be a jackass. And of course, that was the very first trial exhibit to like come like displayed on a big board in the trial. And you know, he just looked like a jerk. And so the judge pinged him really hard when it came to alimony.
Mm-hmm.
That was more though about his bad behavior than any adultery, really, right? I mean, sometimes the clients forget that judges are people too, and not that they will punish someone for thinking the judicial conscience. It doesn't have to be adultery. It can be your behavior in a myriad of different ways that a judge might take into consideration.
Okay. So those are really helpful because the cheating thing is like the number one thing everybody jumps on, because there's the wounded and the wounder, you know, and so the one that's being wounded is hurt and shocked, and they think that should make a difference. And so I'm glad that you guys clarified that. I know that another challenge for people is how to pick a lawyer, because you cannot Google shark lawyer or someone that knows narcissists, or, I mean, most of the time people who are going through a divorce like this don't even know they've been with a narcissist until it gets really ugly. So how does someone pick a lawyer that can support them through what's going to be a pretty big battle?
I mean, I say the same thing as how to pick any lawyer. And that is, you know, I would try to get a referral from somebody that you know and that you trust, number one, rather than just, you know, we don't have yellow pages anymore, but, you know, get online or whatever people do nowadays. I mean, yeah, there are ways to kind of check people out through Martindale Hubble or through Avo or whatever, some of these different services there are, but they're not going to tell you what kind of personality the person has, mm-hmm. or what kind of experience they have in working with narcissists or something like that. So, I mean, you're probably going to have to interview a couple of them and just see, you know, who you have a rapport with, who speaks to you, who do you have a comfort level with. I would say trust your gut.
Well, with that, I've had people that haven't been able to interview lawyers. Like they've called different offices and they're like, you know, you need to give us a deposit before we answer your questions.
Well, there are a lot of attorneys who charge for what I would call an initial consultation. So there are many attorneys do not. Many attorneys will offer a first 30-minute consultation or 1-hour consultation for free, so that you have that opportunity to go in and speak with them, because it is very hard to get a feel for whether that attorney understands the issues that you're facing, and who can address them properly for you. The flip side of that is you can't expect to go in, sit down, and in 30 minutes or half an hour with an attorney, tell them your tale and get a bunch of free legal advice, because that's why most attorneys, or many of them, will charge for that first initial consultation, because many people will come in and they're not really interviewing for the job. They want advice on what they should do. And it's not really the role of the attorney in that initial consultation to tell you how to proceed. It's more of that type of job interview. And the other thing that, you know, as you are talking to an attorney about whether or not you want to hire them for your divorce, and I'm going to speak specifically to a divorce with a high conflict personality, someone who has high conflict personality disorder, you want to be careful, because many people think, well, I'm getting divorced, my spouse has, you know, has borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. I need a shark, like you referenced earlier, or that barracuda, or that person who's going to go in there and fight. There's a little bit of an issue with that with a high conflict personality, because you're feeding them. The fight is what drives them. So an attorney that just goes in there with that slash and burn mentality of file every motion and, you know, take it to a hearing and take everything to the full extent of what is legally available may not be the right person. That may not be, it may feel like what you need, But a person who gets you out of the court system, which is a place where your narcissist, where your abuser will actually be, fulfilled, be given what they're looking for, conflict, fight, attention, all of those things that drive them, you really want to get out of the courtroom setting. So if you're interviewing an attorney, I think one of the first questions you want to ask them is what is their experience with high conflict divorce? Because not every attorney has had that experience and knows what they're dealing with. I have to say, the first time I had a high conflict personality in a divorce, it was a bit shocking to me. I didn't know what I was dealing with, and I've learned a lot over the years. So their experience with that high conflict process is probably the most important thing.
I would just add that the problem with the free consultations, and everybody wants a free consultation, and of course, a lot of the personal injury types of attorneys and people who take their fees on a contingency basis, they'll do the free consultations. The problem with divorce attorneys doing that is that usually in a given area, there's only a handful of competent, very good family law attorneys. And so what people will do is they'll just make the rounds so that their spouse is conflicted off. And so if you offer free consultations, that kind of just, it incentivizes people to do that, number one. And number two, I know divorce attorneys who've offered free consultations, and one of them said to me, I stopped doing that when I realized I spent all day doing nothing but free consultations.
Yeah.
Well,
and that conflicted out issue, we should explain what that means. So once an attorney meets with a party, one of the sides of the divorce, even if that person chooses not to hire them, the attorney would be conflicted in representing the other side of the divorce. So say the husband goes to every, competent divorce attorney in town, and the wife may then have a hard time finding a competent divorce attorney because every attorney who's already heard from the husband or met with him would not be able to take her representation. And that happens. That happens more often than
a lot.
you think.
I did it.
Yeah, okay. So
a lot.
It's a common tactic, especially from people who Google or people who have been through a lot of litigation or a lot of high conflict personalities are not in their first divorce.
Right. So a lot of divorce attorneys do charge because then at least they're being paid for their time to have that conversation. Plus it disincentivizes people from just spending, they're not going to be likely to spend money with every single attorney. Usually. Now, sometimes if they have lots of money, they don't mind, but usually not so much.
But as let's say you are going to pay, or you're narrowing it down to a few, and you want to sit there and ask them some questions. Susan, you said, how are they with high conflict divorce? What other kind of questions should people be asking to see if this is the right fit for them?
Well, I think you would also want to know what sort of, so attorneys go through ongoing continuing legal education, we call it CLE, and there's quite a bit of that. I just attended a conference this past weekend, and 2 of the sessions were about dealing with high conflict personalities in divorce. So you may want to know just what additional training. It's not like when we go to law school. First off, I think family law was a 1-semester course in the first place. So that's all the training you get in law school about even divorce. There's certainly no training in law school about dealing with these high conflict personalities. So this is either something attorney educated up quite a bit on this issue, and then I have my own personal issues with some high conflict personalities that have educated me as well. But so I think you want to know specifically what kind of training they have had in the particular cases dealing with those high conflict personalities.
Yeah, and what their philosophy is on how to settle cases too. I mean, you know, and also I will tell you that a lot of times, even if you pick the very most perfect lawyer for you, if your spouse picks the lawyer who will litigate every single thing, then it kind of makes it difficult for your lawyer to just continue to be the peaceful one, because you have to create enough leverage that the other person might like stop at some point, you know? So, you know, sometimes if certain opposing counsel shows up on the other side, I have to be straight with my client and say, it's really unfortunate that your husband or your wife chose that particular attorney, because I happen to know that that particular attorney likes to litigate everything.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do you think it's
So,
necessary that a lawyer knows about narcissistic?
sorry, today's day and age, I would definitely say yes. I mean, it comes up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And there's, you know, when you're dealing with a narcissistic personality, there is a whole different strategy in negotiation and how to prepare your clients and how to even make proposals for settlement. Always keeping in mind, you know, what a narcissist's main goal is to win. So, you know, when I'm drafting a proposal that is going to go to someone who's exhibiting those tendencies, it's going to be drafted from a perspective where they can see the wins in the proposal. You know, you have to use what you can in dealing with that type of personality. You also have to know how to educate your client on how to keep track of every single detail, keep a journal of because the gaslighting goes on that you know happens with these high conflict personalities. Lying goes on, and so you have to be able to properly educate your client to expect those things. They may not even understand what's going on. I mean, Rebecca, I'm sure you've seen this. The client comes in, they are shell-shocked and you know, stressed out, but they don't even know what they're dealing with. We know what they're dealing with, and
day in and day out that the person is a liar. But then as soon as the person starts saying things like, oh, your lawyer is just out for fees, or your lawyer is not for you, or something, or something in the case like, I'm telling you that my business is only worth this. Why are you bothering to get a forensic accountant? You don't need that, or whatever it is. Then they believe the person. And so the lawyer has sometimes a challenge with, you know, that the person is a pathological liar. So why are you believing this particular thing? You know, and so that can be a bit of a challenge for the lawyer sometimes too. And just in negotiations, I'll just add that one of the things that I do when I'm preparing for mediation or preparing the client for a mediation or a negotiation is decide right off the bat, like what things you're going to go for, but you don't really care if you get, so that it looks like you're giving in on certain issues. So it seems like they're winning on that, but you've actually controlled that piece of it.
yeah, hugely important.
Yeah, I would imagine, because if you don't give in, I mean, I went through a mediation that was like a joke. They would just go off into the room and they would just sit there and go, we're not giving her a penny. And the mediator would come in and go, he's not giving you a penny. And it would just go back. And it was 6 hours of like, why are we here? So having that list beforehand, I think would have helped us, but wasn't in the cards at the time. What if someone hires the wrong lawyer? Because I've heard people say they've switched lawyers midway. Is it start all over again? Is that a good piece of advice, or is it sometimes necessary that they've just found someone that isn't able to help them?
I would say that sometimes that does happen. And if you don't have a good rapport with your lawyer, then certainly, you know, you should switch lawyers. However, with the caveat that if you have switched lawyers 6 or 8 times, which I've seen people do, now the judge is starting to think you're the one who has a problem. Especially if you don't pay your last lawyer's bills and things like that. It'll start to get to a point where no lawyer's going to touch you. So I would say, yes, switch lawyers if you need to, but be careful about switching too much.
Right. And I've seen narcissists use that as a slowing down the divorce tactic, where they're like, you're so close, and then, oh, he's got a new lawyer. And it's almost a technique that they're using to make it take longer.
Well, and, in defense of some of the lawyers, when you have a client who's a narcissist, and I've been there, I suspect Rebecca has been there as well. Sometimes you have to fire the client because the relationship breaks down, and
definitely.
Sometimes it's not really the narcissist who's breaking off the attorney-client relationship. It's the attorney getting out. And that, people with high conflict personalities will often have multiple attorneys, because the attorney is the savior and the great person in the beginning. But, when the court system doesn't 100% go the narcissist way, then the attorney becomes the bad person, and they get either fired, or the attorney, hopefully for their own safety, can get out. I've had to file multiple motions to withdraw when I've gotten caught up in cases, because, going to the core of all this, narcissists are very appealing, and they have the ability to come in and we get hired and sucked in the same way that people get married to them. And sometimes you got to get out.
Well, yeah, and it happens a lot because, normal people who are reasonable and know how to communicate with each other don't usually get divorced. I mean, it's the ones who have these kinds of personalities that tend to be more of the ones getting a divorce. So divorce lawyers often end up with the one who's, not the fun one to deal with. And so, it's a bit of a challenge to manage that personality as a client too.
Right, especially because if they're constantly, like, a settlement could be close, and then the narcissist is like, no, and I can imagine the lawyer just going, what else do you want me to do? Because we've done all of this.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Does have to end, and the narcissist doesn't want it to.
I had it one time. I had a guy who at 9:00 at night after a 12-hour mediation said, I'm not settling. We were getting ready to sign the marital settlement agreement, and he said, I'm not settling until she gives me the cufflinks that her dad gave me on our wedding day. I want the cufflinks or $5,000. And I just wanted to throttle him myself. I mean, and he's my own client, and I'm like looking at him with these like evil eyes, like, it's 9:00, and and I first thing I said to him, I said, well, tell me this, are the cufflinks worth $5,000? Let's start there. And he said, nope, and I don't care. I want the cufflinks or $5,000. And I'll tell you something that was, I thought, very eye-opening. He had 2 children, he had this wife, whatever, and she kept accusing him of being a narcissist. I had to stop by his office one time to get another signature on a document. And there were posters all around the office of just himself on a bicycle, himself on the mountain, himself skiing, like...
all those great family portraits.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
Was there a fake Time, the Time magazine cover on the wall?
Yeah.
A wax figure of himself?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's like almost.
Someone showed me last night, I was out with a group of people, and someone showed me a commissioned painting that her husband had done. And she said there's like 20 of them. He's had paintings done of himself. And again, they're all over his medical office. And it was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. See, if you want to know if a person's a narcissist, go look at their office.
Scary, right? And now it makes me almost afraid to put a picture up of me and my son. Oh, I got to cut.
No, this was just him.
Yeah.
If it had been him and his son, I wouldn't have thought anything of it.
Yeah, exactly. So what kind of things do you guys, I know I can tell you lots of tricks that narcissists pull. high conflict divorce is the lying, the cheating, the money hiding, the asset, lying and not producing documents. But what kind of things should people, like, again, it's not going to necessarily happen to them, but what kind of things have you guys heard of that you've seen pulled?
Oh gosh.
Where to begin?
Where
There's
to
so
begin?
many. I had a guy who was from the Middle East that had sent $1 million over to his home country. He thought that he was going to be able to, he was Muslim from his country and she was Christian from the country. I think it was Lebanon. And he thought, in his country, if you say I divorced you 3 times, the woman has to go live in the street, so he kind of was hoping that would be the same thing that would happen over here. That was the one that lasted 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, though that was the one that lasted 5 years.
That lasted 5 years, but we got the $1 million back. She got that back.
Well, hiding money is a huge thing with personality disorders, with high conflict, because money is a control. Money,
right.
And very often in these relationships, the abuser has control of the money in some fashion. And that hiding of funds is just so common. And that's one of the things that drags the divorces out, because the attorney then has to go through an extremely lengthy discovery process, which has to be coerced the entire way, because they don't just turn over their financial documents and then they don't turn them all over. There's always, the relevant bank statement is never in the stack, the first stack, third stack, or 12th stack that you get. I had one client who we couldn't figure out how the money had been taken out of the country, but she was certain that he had bank accounts until she sat down and wrote down for us every place they had ever gone on vacation in the past several years. And they were all countries that had, private banking and offshore banking. They went to the Cayman Islands, they went to the Bahamas, and every time he took off for a day and went off with a briefcase. So we finally pieced it all together, but not an easy thing to do. But that took 2 years of chasing, and I'm sure we never found it all.
Right.
But
I'm sure we never found it all either.
I mean, for years, he had, every time they went on a vacation, there was that little briefcase with what we now know was full of cash, which probably, exceeded the $9,999 legal limit as well. But we found a lot of it, but that's the sort of thing, the person who's trying to get divorced from the high conflict personality often has to sit down and really work hard to pull together the facts. It's not just, it's not just what's happened recently during the divorce. Very often these personalities have gone through a long time, well planned out, and it's usually not the first time they've done it, again, because they've been in other relationships and marriages, planned out, path of hiding assets, putting things in their own name, putting it in family members' names. They do that all the time.
And by the way, the gaslighting is happening all along the way, because like when she finds the money, he'll say, I told you that. We discussed it. We had a conversation and you said it was okay.
Right.
Like that, like trying to make the other person think they're crazy.
Yeah. Well, my ex-husband had a Swiss bank account. And I had the bank account numbers. I could bring that, and the judge was like, well, that's in another country. Sorry, I can't do anything about it. And I didn't get to pursue any of that. He also put his family put a multi-million-dollar house in his name during the divorce, produced fake documentation that, oh no, it's not in his name, and lied. I mean, it was a 28-page legal document going, look, here's the electric bill. It's always been in the mother's name. It's not in his name. And they sat there, the mother testified on the stand. It wasn't in his name. I had been part of the conversation. I knew they were doing it. I'm not stupid. And they sat there lying, and that was a whole entire trial. And then the next week we were able to access the records from the town and come back the next month for our fourth or fifth trial and then say, well, look, here's the papers. Look, here's the bill of sale. Did you forget this last month? And my in-laws and my husband were like, yeah, pretty much. A multi-million-dollar house. We put it in his name, but within a week, by the time you could get us back to court, they'd already put it in an irrevocable trust that I had no access to, and it technically wasn't in his name anymore. So those kind of tricks were certainly nothing I would have ever expected, but that was planned. That was not something they did in that last minute. That had been planned. And, you know, as you said, this is not something that just because they're getting a divorce, they decided to hide money. They've been hiding it all along.
Yeah. Well, and in that particular case, in your particular case, unfortunately, it sounds like you were dealing with a whole family of high conflict personalities with some personality disorders.
I was going to say the apple didn't fall far from that tree, did it?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But, you know, that's the thing in divorce. I mean, there were two things I thought of there. One, that is what happens when divorce happens. Families stick together even when it comes to lying on behalf of their family members. I cannot count how many times I've had parents come in and lie for their daughter, or brothers come in and lie for their brother, or, you know, it's not uncommon where, and my client always be like, but they always really liked me, or I'm the mother of their grandchildren. Doesn't matter. Families tend to go, it's always something to look at. It's always suspect. You have to be careful with families, as well as, you know, when you're doing that discovery, when we were talking about what to look for in an attorney. So an attorney who is acquainted with dealing with those high conflict personalities and that propensity to hide things, you know, knows that it's often, although a little more expensive and sometimes more difficult, it's better to go to the source to get financial records, such as you got the utilities from the town or from the provider, as opposed to from the other side, because often you either are not going to get the whole picture or you're not going to get the truth. So a lot of times, rather than waste months trying to get your discovery materials from the other side, in many cases, it's just better to go and issue a subpoena directly to the provider or to the town or to the bank, and get them, or the IRS or whoever you're trying to get them from. Because how many false tax returns, or I've gotten the TurboTax worksheets that were not the actual worksheets that were turned into the tax return, or, you know, these days it's very easy to create false documents.
Wow.
You know, it's funny though. What I think is interesting is sort of like dog owners end up with dogs that kind of look like them. I think the high conflict lawyers end up with the high conflict personalities, or vice versa. They always seem to make their way to each other. I don't know how that happens, but they do find it.
I know. And then that's what, you know, that was that shark, Googling the shark, because everybody that I've always talked to who's been going through this, their spouse has hired the shark. You know, they are, you know, they're gravitated to the one that's going to litigate. And maybe that's not the truth. Maybe everyone has believed that the lawyer was at fault, but it's the narcissist driving the bus of
not necessarily. I mean,
right.
you know, believe me.
Just as there are narcissists and high conflict personalities out there in the world, there are plenty in our profession. It can be a high profile profession, so it is appealing, especially to narcissists in some case, because there is that, you know, you're out and you're seen and you're a crusader, or, you know, clients look up to you for helping them. So,
and the other thing is, I think sometimes lawyers think that they're not doing a good job somehow if they give in, or lawyers that don't know what they're doing as much sometimes are more difficult just because they're more insecure, and by being more difficult somehow they think it makes them better. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's been my experience.
Yeah, there's that whole concept of you've got to fight to the death, or you've got to win everything for your client. And I long ago learned that getting my client out of the high conflict relationship and separating them so they can start moving forward, start healing from what they went through, rather than suffering through years of the abuse that just continues in the courtroom through the courtroom process, the judicial process, it's actually a win if we can get them out and get it over with as quickly as possible.
I mean, the thing for me that I just always try to keep my eye on as far as the ball was concerned is, what's a fair settlement for my client? And, if getting my client to a fair settlement means that we have to litigate a part of it, then that's what we have to do. But, I think the important thing is to just keep your eye on that ball rather than I want to win, I don't want to look bad, I don't want to, all of those other things that don't necessarily matter. What does the law provide and what is a fair settlement?
Right.
Yeah.
That's key, because I think financial abuse ends up being part of the legal abuse. The longer this goes on, the less money you have, the more you owe, and the quicker you guys can get them out is I would think a very important mission to make sure that the lawyer is going to get you something that's fair, but also not be the one to be egging on and poking the lion or whatever you call it.
Yeah, no doubt. But you also have to look at the return on your investment. Like, don't spend $50,000 litigating an extra $100 a month or something like that. I mean,
yeah, don't litigate the principle of the thing. I tell clients all the time, your peace of mind is worth, there's a dollar sign attached to it. And at some point in time in this process, you have to make a decision that it is worth it to be done with terms that you can live with. They may not be exactly what you wanted, but you can live with them. And for that benefit, you're willing to either pay more or take less or whatever it is. And only you know what your peace of mind is worth, but always put that at the forefront, because that whole desire to, Rebecca calls it looking for justice rather than
divorce law versus divorce justice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The courtroom, family court, not the place to find justice. It's a place to separate your life out from this person you don't want to be married to anymore. And so you can get to pass the divorce and move forward with your life. Heal, get into a better place, find a new relationship, whatever that means for you. But that limbo time of the divorce where you're still tied to, in these cases, your abuser or just this terrible terminal relationship, you need to end that.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of mistakes that, I don't know what to call us victims, but the opposition to the narcissist, the person that's getting involved in this, they will make mistakes that they treat their lawyer like a therapist, and they're just going in there and wah, and there goes your bill. They're not going to help you in that regard. They'll listen to you, but the meter's running, right?
That usually happens more
an hour.
Yeah, that usually happens more the first month. And they get the bill, and then they go, well, maybe not.
Well, that happens so often. I have a common phrase I use, but I always explain it to my client that, I will listen to you and I feel for you. I'm a human being. I have empathy for the situation you're going through. At the end of everything you're going to say, I'm going to say to you, as your attorney, there's nothing I can do for you with respect to that. I feel for you, but I can't, this is not something that is a legal issue. So when I tell you you're better off speaking to your therapist who actually can help you perhaps with this, and who is usually much less expensive per hour than I am, it's not that I don't want to listen to you. I want you to actually get the help that you deserve and you need. And I don't want you to be paying me who cannot help you with that. It just doesn't make sense. So, I had one client who used to always call me up and she'd go, Susan, I know that, as my attorney, this isn't something that you can help with, but you listen really well and I just want to vent, so it's worth it. And I'm like, all right, well, you know what you're getting into. And she never balked at paying that bill, but she also just took the opportunity to go on for an hour or two, but that worked for her. But in general, it doesn't work for people.
But
getting
one of the
mental
things,
health is a big deal.
one of the things I would say to my clients sometimes, though, is like, I had a client one time who was married to a narcissist, and she calls me up one day, and they had an altercation in the school parking lot, dropping their kids off at school or whatever. And she's like, "Can you believe he did this? And can you believe he did that?" And I, after she did her little rant, I said, "Yes, I can believe it. What I can't believe is that you can't believe it. You've been married to him for 20 years. Isn't that how he's always been?" And it kind of like checked her, like, oh yeah, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be like venting about this anyway, because just expect that that's how he's going to be.
Yeah. And I think also there's a part that should, I don't know if there's like a shock meter, but we get shocked when they lie about us, when they call someone a bad parent, when they're hiding assets. We're in shock. And so of course, as a victim, I'm leading to my lawyer. I'm leaning for help to anywhere that will listen to me. But again, that crosses the line on what your lawyer can do and how you can get help in some other mean or fashion. And I know you guys are both, actually, Rebecca, are you a divorce coach versus a lawyer? I know you're both attorneys, but are you coaching?
Well, I've done some coaching, but I'm still I'm still actually a partner in Florida. I am in California now, and I do a little bit of divorce coaching. But my entire career has really been high net worth divorce litigation. And that's what I've done for years. And that's my book, Breaking Free, is based on that, and how to get through that, and everything that we've been doing. And, Susan and I recently founded a mindful mediation company. It's called Breaking Free Mediation. And it's the first in the country to offer a mindfulness track along with the regular traditional divorce mediation, so that people can learn how to meditate, how to calm themselves, how to breathe, how to think straight, and also get themselves divorced.
Right. Without making emotion. Number one thing we see as divorce attorneys or mediators is people making decisions from their emotional base, not from their intellectual base, and making mistakes. So this has a whole component that tries to help people at least regulate the very high emotional content that goes along with divorce. Even a high conflict divorce, as you just said, Tracy, people react. Oh my God, he just accused me of being a bad mom. Oh my God, she just said this about me. So learning to deal with mindfully with that component, that emotional component, learning to regulate it and know that that's something that's coming from the outside, not coming from, I'm not a bad mother, I'm not a bad guy, I'm not this, I'm not that, has a lot to do with people making informed and intelligent decisions, which help them get to the end of the process better.
Which, by the way, I should mention, we have a free meditation that we had recorded for Breaking Free Mediation. It's a giveaway that we have. You go to breakingfreefromdivorce.com/free meditation. And we had it recorded by a gentleman named Scott Picard, who's one of the top meditation teachers in the country. He's been featured in Vogue magazine and LA Times. He has several celebrity clients, and we were lucky enough to get him to do it for us. So it's not one of us doing the meditation, even though we enjoy it very much ourselves.
It's a 5-minute just calming meditation. And
yes.
It's good for anyone, honestly, not just people going through divorce. Anyone facing a bit of a challenge in their day, it's a good grounding and centering meditation to start off with.
And I think so to get to that meditation, again, is just breakingfreefromdivorce.com/free meditation.
We'll put the link in the notes down below so people can dig out for that.
And the website for the mediation company is breakingfreemediation.com.
Okay. And that's Florida and California, or is it?
It is Florida, California, Illinois, and Connecticut.
Awesome. You guys
are all over the place.
You are. Do you have to split yourselves and be like, oh, I'm my brain is in Connecticut today, and then I'm here and there?
Pretty much.
We do have to think about it sometimes because they're very different states. But we are we are covered in all four of them. So
yeah.
Nice. Well, you guys have an amazing podcast. Does anybody want to talk about that so that people can learn more about you and how they can listen to these podcasts that are going to give them a lot of helpful information?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that we had featured you, Tracy, on one of our podcasts, and you are one of our top episodes, one of our most listened to episodes, which is called Escaping Hell, How to Survive and Get Out of a Relationship with a Narcissist. So that's, I just want to make sure we get that in there because your episode was phenomenal.
it was, and it's actually our fastest rising, and I expect you're going to be at the top of the listens heap very soon.
Yes.
But it's well worth listening to.
So the name of the podcast is Breaking Free, a Modern Divorce Podcast. The actual website is on Podbean, but we're also on iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher Podcasts, Google Play, and a number of other places. We're pretty much everywhere podcasts are. So
I know it's amazing when you start, it's like, okay, I'm going to get on iTunes and then, oh, that one and that one and that one. And before you know it, you're like syndicated all over the world.
Yeah,
pretty much are. We actually, Susan, how many countries do we have now? Like 85?
No, more than that. I think we're well over 100 countries we've been heard in so far. And this morning we were in the top 10 on iTunes yet again. We've been there a few times. So that was a very good, good morning surprise.
And I think just in the last 30 days alone, we have close to 100,000 listens, and we only launched at the end of July. So it's definitely striking a chord with people, which we're very happy about.
Well, I think what you guys are doing is breaking the norm of a lot of divorce attorneys, and people are looking for that free consultation. And that's what your podcasts are. You're giving them answers. Yeah. You're giving them what they looked for in that 15-minute free consultation. So they should be taking advantage and educating themselves. For me, I just find that when people start to learn about narcissism, when they start to learn about their own accountability in this relationship, that education, if you just like stop, people go, oh, I learned about a narcissist, and they stop learning why me, what was my accountability, and there's codependency. It's not your fault. It's not like we're going to blame you, but oh, I allowed that. Or people have no boundaries. I'm teaching a class tomorrow night on boundaries, and this is about the 4th time I've done it. I'll get 55 people in the room that are adults and just go, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do it. And therefore I made myself perfect narc bait.
And if I may just do a plug for one other of our shows that actually touches right on that, is just this past Monday, not yesterday, but a week ago, we released an episode with a very top-notch life coach named David Essel, who's been featured by celebrities all over the world. And he talks exactly about that. The name of the episode is Consciously Healing and Thriving Through Divorce. And he talks exactly about how to create those boundaries and how to stop being a victim.
Yeah. Because it's really important. And especially if they're going through this divorce process, they're going to be vulnerable. For me, I had just finished the worst divorce in our town's history. And friends introduced me about 3 months later.
Just what you want to be known for, right?
Oh, yeah. But friends introduced me to their friend who had just been through a horrible divorce too. And he was the worst narcissist. He was obviously, the reason I learned about all of this. But you get sucked up by another one if you don't learn and do the work. So you're making yourself vulnerable. So learning about your own accountability and what you need to learn to protect yourself, not just learn about them, but let's go out and figure out why we stayed and why we were blind. And we were blind because we loved them and we wanted to trust them. But that's not self-love. That's not having the responsibility to say, you know what, I deserve better than this. And that's where we want people to get to when they go through a horrific divorce.
Definitely.
I thank you guys so much for joining me. It has been a pleasure. And, you guys are rock stars. And I think you're going to change the way that the face of divorce is. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much. This is Tracy. I am so thankful that you were here to listen to this, and I hope that you've gained some knowledge and a little bit more confidence to understand the process and pick that right lawyer. It's not easy, and you've got a battle ahead of you, but that doesn't mean that you can't be educated, and it doesn't mean that you can't be prepared. Sadly, most people don't know that they're divorcing a narcissist until it hits. So now's the time to educate yourself. It's easy to wallow in the accusations and the hurt and everything, but take this time to learn about divorcing a narcissist. Go and watch and listen to some of Rebecca and Susan's videos and podcasts so that you can get that inside information, that we're longing for the divorce attorney to give us in a free consultation. Let's get it from them. Let's get it from the resources that are talking, that are more progressive, and know about divorcing someone in a high conflict divorce. This is Tracy. If you haven't visited my website, narcissistabusesupport.com, I highly recommend that you find some of the resources that you need there. There's also lists of support groups that you can get into. I run 2 support groups here in Colorado, and I would say more than 50% every time we meet are going through a divorce. So meeting someone and having them validate what you're going through is going to change your life. So don't do this alone. Get some help. If you are interested or in need of some coaching, tell me about this. What does this mean? I do coaching, and I can help you figure out the puzzles, figure out what you need to do next. You want to work with your attorney, but you also need this extra support with someone that understands the behaviors of a narcissist. I have talked to thousands of victims of abuse and divorces through narcissists, and I can help you figure out some of these puzzle pieces. So thank you for watching, and visit my website, and that's all I got. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.